Hey there, gamers. Today, I want to introduce an action game that's explosively cool, Devil May Cry 5. Although it's been out for over 4 years, I just finished it recently, and if you haven't played it yet, I think it's still totally worth getting in 2023. Devil May Cry 3 holds a special place in my childhood memories. Over a decade ago, I was totally hooked by Dante's awesome charisma. It was a blast. Now, after all these years, Dante's face shows some signs of aging, but he's still as cool as ever. Alright, enough chit-chat. Let's dive into what Capcom calls the most powerful action game of the Heisei era. First of all, the best action game of the Heisei era, which refers to the period between 1989 and 2019. As someone who has been crazily playing video games for over 20 years during the Heisei era, I think I have a bit of a say in this. As we all know, action games are a vast category with numerous subgenres, and in recent years, they have become even more diverse. It's impossible to say that this game is the most enjoyable action game of the past 30 years. Fans of the Souls-like games might argue that games like Sekiro or Bloodborne are the best. Followers of Metroidvania games might praise Hollow Knight or Ori. The God of War, which won the Game of the Year award a few years back, is undoubtedly a masterpiece in many people's eyes. And of course, the Monster Hunter series has tens of millions of dedicated fans. However, all of the mentioned games offer more than just combat. They also have other captivating elements. If we're discussing pure action or, more precisely, games where combat is almost 100% of the fun, Devil May Cry definitely ranks in the top 3. The only contender that comes close is the Bayonetta series, which also provides an incredibly satisfying gameplay experience, somewhat resembling Dante's combat style. Alright, in short, if we narrow it down to the best combat action of the Heisei era, I think Devil May Cry deserves that title without a doubt. Nowadays, games are becoming easier. There are fewer games that truly challenge the player's reflexes and skills. We should cherish games like this. Some of you might be wondering, wait, aren't Souls-like games notoriously difficult? Indeed, the Souls-like games are exception, going against the mainstream trend and still being incredibly successful. However, the difficulty in Souls-like games mainly stems from the player's understanding of the game's combat mechanics and the mindset they adopt. In these games, the emphasis is often on conceptual understanding rather than just quick reflexes or manual dexterity. If you can read and comprehend the enemy's attack patterns and fully grasp the combat mechanics, you've already won over half the battle. Even if your execution is not perfect or your reaction speed is slower, you can still succeed. There have been instances where people have beaten tough bosses in games like Sekiro while blindfolded or using their feet, which further proves the significance of understanding the game's concept. I mean, I don't believe anyone could beat Devil May Cry using their feet and still achieve an SSS ranking. Games that heavily focus on precise execution and quick reflexes are quite rare these days, so we should cherish them. As far as I know, there are probably only Devil May Cry and the Bayonetta series that fit this description. If you know of any other similar games, please feel free to share. Alright, let's delve a bit deeper into the combat system of Devil May Cry 5. Unlike many modern games where you can simply press a predefined hotkey to use a skill, this game is more akin to a fighting game, requiring various button combinations to execute moves, a bit old school in that sense. The skill upper limit in the combat of this game is incredibly high, and the gap between experts and beginners is vast. Watching skilled players in action can make you feel frustrated, while the game's skill cap is high. If you're playing on normal difficulty, most regular players should be able to handle around 95% of the enemies with just basic attacks, and they might only encounter slight difficulty with a few bosses, which could take around half an hour to defeat. But the rest of the enemies can be taken down solely with regular attacks, no need for fancy skills. This game is different from your typical action game. It's not just about how to defeat enemies, it's about doing it in a stylish and over-the-top way. It's all about being cool and edgy while taking down your foes. You'll have to figure out how to smoothly execute various moves and arrange them in different combinations to take down enemies. The possibilities are vast, and it's really worth exploring. If you have fast reflexes, clear move memorization, and plan your attacks logically, you can pull off some really cool and stylish moves. For example, you can start by launching the enemy into the air with an aerial move. Then keep them suspended with a series of aerial combos, and once you satisfied, finish them off with a ground move as they land. Alternatively, you can launch a downward attack from the air or pull the enemy towards you for more punishment. There are countless ways to approach combat. After each battle, the game evaluates how stylishly you fought based on the number of skills used, the fluency of combos, and the minimal number of hits received. Throughout the game, the goal is to stylishly defeat enemies. Speaking of enemies, while the game's regular monsters have unique and intricate designs, their fighting styles aren't that different. You mostly charge in and combo them, as their attack patterns and frequency are relatively straightforward. When it comes to bosses, Devil May Cry 5 truly excels in character design. Each boss has a unique appearance, and they get more stylish and impressive as you progress. However, their fights are still heavily reliant on fast reflexes and execution rather than complex strategies. Once you understand their attack patterns, it's mostly about going all out and frantically attacking. More than 80% of the time is spent thinking about how to execute stylish combos, and achieving high scores after pulling them off smoothly is incredibly satisfying. The combat is really enjoyable and offers a high level of excitement. In summary, the combat in this game is easy to pick up but difficult to master. Beating the game may be simple, but achieving smooth, stylish combos requires a lot of skill and finesse. Alright, let's talk about the playable characters. Excluding DLC, the game features 3 playable characters: Nero, V, and Dante. Firstly, Nero has 3 main characteristics: Devil Breaker, which enable Nero perform various function, a wire snatching move to bring enemies closer, and the chargeable sword, Red Queen. On the other hand, V is a bit like a summoner, as he can control 3 different demons to assist in combat. As for Dante, well, his characteristic is just being cool. I can't quite put it into words. In my opinion, these 3 characters offer noticeably different levels of enjoyment in combat. Personally, I find it difficult to get used to playing as Nero, as he feels like a watered-down version of Dante. Operating him feels somewhat sluggish and frustrating. While the combat can be enjoyable at times, it's just not as satisfying as playing as Dante. Although it's clear that the game developers put effort into distinguishing Nero from Dante, with features like the Devil Breaker being unique and interesting, I still find it challenging to find the right timing to use it effectively in combat. The Devil Breaker has many different functions and moves, but it's not as easy to smoothly combo it with other moves during actual gameplay. I feel it's challenging to find a way to use it without disrupting the flow of combat. Overall, I can't help but think, if we have Dante, why do we need Nero? It's like, why settle for Nero when you can have the real deal with Dante? Alright, moving on to V, it seems that many people don't really like his combat gameplay, but I actually find it surprisingly enjoyable. The controls feel intuitive and fast-paced, unlike what you might expect from a typical slow-paced mage character. These summons include a close combat Shadow, a long-range attacking Griffin, and a Nightmare, devastating attack similar to a powerful ultimate move. What I find most enjoyable about V is not so much the gameplay with the summons, but rather using his cane. In the game, demons cannot be directly killed by the summons. They are only knocked into a near-death state and need to be finished off by V every time a demon is knocked into that state. Teleporting as V and swiftly finishing them off one by one gives an indescribable sense of satisfaction. Another fun aspect is that V seems particularly easy to achieve high ratings. As long as you smoothly rotate between the skills of each summon, you might accidentally get an S or higher rating. It gives you the illusion that you're really skilled, and it's quite enjoyable, to be honest. Alright, finally, let's talk about Dante. He's the definition of epic. I believe playing as him is much more enjoyable than V or Nero. Dante is the quintessential Devil May Cry character. He has 4 combat styles that you can switch between in the middle of battles. Gunslinger, focusing on long-range moves; Swordmaster, focusing on close-range moves; Royal Guard, focusing on defense and counterattacks; and Trickster, focusing on quick movements and dodging. Moreover, Dante has a wide variety of melee and ranged weapons, including swords, gauntlets, nunchucks, dual pistols, shotguns, rocket launchers, and more. With different combat styles combined with different melee and ranged weapons, the possibilities are endless, and you can seamlessly switch between them during battles. Playing as Dante is fast-paced, allowing players with excellent reflexes to shine. The combinations are endlessly varied, and there's no truly useless style or weapon. Every combination can be powerful, making the combat upper limit is incredibly high. The skill gap between advanced players and beginners in Devil May Cry can be truly massive. Personally, I love gameplay with a sense of speed, so if a game offers class options, I usually go for assassins or thieves. That's why when I play as Dante, about 70% of the time, I use the Trickster style, which feels like playing an agile assassin or thief from other games. For melee weapons, I mostly rely on the fast-paced gauntlets, which are extremely satisfying to use. With just continuous normal attacks, you can unleash a rapid flurry of punches on enemies. You can even switch the gauntlet mode to increase attack power but slightly reduce speed, and perform powerful kicking attacks. The only downside of the gauntlets might be that your hands might get sore from constantly spamming normal attacks to build up their fiery power and increase their attack strength. After beating up just a few small enemies, your hands might feel super tired. Alright, besides the widely known high-intensity combat system, Devil May Cry series has many other impressive aspects. Let's talk about some of the aspects that amazed me in Devil May Cry 5. First, the game's characters are incredibly charming. Apart from the beloved fan favorites, the edgy and stylish Dante, and the cool and collected Virgil, each character's personality is well developed. For instance, V, the dark and emo-style character, and Nero, the hot-blooded, impulsive, and rebellious one. Even the non-playable characters have well-crafted personalities. And one character that stands out is Nico. She shows charisma and is worth mentioning. Her trash talking is top-notch and quite entertaining. Watching her banter with Nero is so satisfying. And it's clear she has the upper hand in the verbal sparring. But she's not just all fierce and fiery. When she faces her idol, Dante, her fangirl side comes out. And although she maintains a nonchalant demeanor, you can sense her excitement and shyness as a fan. The character development is truly impressive, and all the characters leave a lasting impression. Another small yet delightful game design element is also related to Nico. Before facing bosses, a telephone booth appears in the game, allowing you to call Nico to bring her van to help you restock items, buy equipment, or change skills, basically preparing you for the boss fight. The way Nico shows up each time is so creative and interesting. It's always a surprise and a treat. You can't help but wonder how she managed to drive her van into such peculiar locations. The absurdity of her entrances is entertaining. And as you progress in the game, you genuinely look forward to her appearances and wonder what quirky and stylish entrance she'll make next. Although it's just a small segment that doesn't affect the gameplay itself, it adds a significant amount of fun and excitement to the overall gaming experience. Alright, let's talk about the game's drawbacks. Firstly, the level design is noticeably too simple. While it's not entirely repetitive, each chapter follows a similar pattern, making it quite predictable and lacking surprises. The progression usually goes like this. You follow an obvious path until you reach a large square, where you know you'll be ambushed by enemies, and then the combat begins. After defeating the enemies, you continue on the obvious path until you encounter another large square, and this pattern repeats until you face the boss. The puzzle-solving elements are almost non-existent, from an objective perspective of game design. This is a clear drawback, but as a longtime fan of the series, I personally don't mind it much and wouldn't consider it a major negative point. After all, when I play Devil May Cry, I don't expect it to have exploration or puzzle-solving elements like in games such as The Legend of Zelda. The second drawback is probably the lack of character development, which may seem too fan-service-oriented. At the beginning of the game, there are numerous important characters introduced, but their backstories and relationships are not properly explained, leaving the story and character connections shrouded in mystery. As the story progresses, some character relationships are gradually clarified, but not everything is fully explained. For players who haven't played the previous games, it may be difficult to become invested in the story and characters, as they won't understand who is familiar with whom, the depth of their relationships, or what happened in the past. Although the main menu includes a sort of Devil May Cry series story recap video to help players catch up quickly, I suspect that almost half of new players may not bother watching it and jump right into the game, which is a bit of a pity. Alright, lastly, here are some purchasing recommendations. If you're a fan of action games or a longtime fan of the Devil May Cry series, there's nothing much to say. This game is a must-play. It's rare to find such a satisfying old-school action game like this nowadays. If you haven't played the previous installments, it's not a problem at all. While the story continues from the fourth game, the plot isn't the main selling point of this game. You can still have a blast playing it. If you've played and loved Bayonetta but haven't tried Devil May Cry, then you absolutely can't miss this game. Both series offer similar gameplay enjoyment. And if you're worried that being a 4 or 5-year-old game might make it feel outdated and unplayable, I assure you that it's not the case. The visuals, sound effects, and overall performance still hold up even in 2023. And the traditional fighting game style combat system is the game's charm. It's a bonus rather than a drawback. Alright, thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoy this type of game commentary, game reviews, or game recommendations, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.